whether or not you should file an amended tax return. Now, this isn't specific tax advice. This is an interactive tax assistant tool that you can find on the IRS website. And I'll put a link to this in the show notes in the case that you are interested in walking through this for your own tax situation. So filing an amended tax return usually is done for a couple of reasons. The most obvious reason for most taxpayers is because they missed something and they think that they might be able to get a refund that they're entitled to simply by filing an amended tax return. In other words, they overpaid their tax liability because of a mistake that they made, some sort of either clerical error or tax deduction they didn't know, or something just happened. So a lot of people might catch this while they're reviewing tax planning with their financial advisor, as more and more financial advisors incorporate tax planning into their financial planning process. Sometimes people might catch it on their own. Sometimes their tax preparer might bring it up to them. But whatever the case may be, you might just be wondering about some situation and you don't know whether or not you should file an amended return or not. Of course, the other obvious reason would be if you received a notice from the IRS stating, hey, there's something wrong. A lot of times the IRS will find and correct these errors, and they might not do anything other than just recalculate your tax liability and then either send you a payment notice that you're going to get paid for an overpayment of your taxes, or a bill due because you owe more taxes than you originally thought. So there might be certain circumstances where you need to file an amended return to correct that error because the IRS cannot do so. So before we begin with the interactive tax assistant, I do want to dispel one pretty common myth. Now, a lot of people will say that you cannot amend a tax return more than 3 years prior. So if you're in 2023, then you would be able to file any tax return that was no more than 3 years old, going back to the starting with the filing date for the 2023 tax year. So using the April 15th, 2024 timeline, you would be able to file an amended return for the 2022 tax year, the 2021 tax year, and the 2020 tax year. Now, that rule only applies if you're seeking a refund from the IRS. You have up to 3 years of a tax return's original due date. So for example, the original due date for the 2020 tax return would have been on or around April 15th of 2021, give or take whether or not that day fell on a weekend or a business or a work holiday. So that 3-year period means that you have up until April 15th, or the tax filing deadline in 2024, to file an amended return for the 2020 tax year if you're expecting a tax refund. However, you can file an amended return on any previous tax return if you're not expecting a refund. So we'll walk through some of the questions and we'll kind of back out and go through different scenarios so you can visualize for your own tax situation. This tax assistant asks about 5 or 6 questions, and it kind of gives a pre-canned response based on how you answer this question. So it's very straightforward. It should take no more than 5 minutes for any person to do this on their own. I'll walk through a couple of scenarios, so it might take a little bit longer. So first thing we do, we just begin. So this takes us to the Interactive Tax Assistant website. I'm not going to put this URL in the show notes because it is god awful looking and it's a mile long. So I'll put the URL for the previous page, which is a little bit simpler and more straightforward. So you can go to the Interactive Assistant homepage if you want, but right now we're on the File and Amended Return section. So we're going to go to that. And again, which tax year are you wanting to amend? For expected refunds, you would need to know you can't go any further back than 2020. And obviously, if we're in 2023, you can't file an amended return for your 2023 tax return. So let's just say we're filing for the 2019 tax year. You know what? Let's make it 2020 just in case. So we're going to, so now in this case, there's an extra question in here that has to do with specifically one of the rebate credits or the premium tax credit that were given during that tax year. So if I backed out of that and selected a different tax year, that question would not show up. It would show up as a different one for economic impact payment. If you showed the 2021, there's going to be, oh, so hold on. Oh, here we go. Okay, so apparently when you cycle through different tax years, some of those old questions pop up. So as I cycle through those years, year-specific questions might pop up. So we'll go back to 2020. We're not trying to amend the 2019 tax return. That was just a previous question that kind of got stuck in there. So for the 2020 tax year, you may be trying to amend your return only for either a mistake in calculating the recovery rebate credit, or if you completed Part 3 of IRS Form 8962, which is the repayment of the excess advance payment of the premium tax credit if you were on the healthcare exchange. And 2022 happened to be kind of a year of flux because there were a lot of tax laws that were passed during the year that changed a lot of tax consequences. The IRS was scrambling to catch up, and a lot of the tax preparation software companies probably, they couldn't go ahead of any of the IRS regulations. So there might be a lot of room in here to do an amended tax return. So if we selected yes, then we would answer whether or not we actually filed an original tax return. So to file an amended tax return, you have to have filed the original beforehand. And believe it or not, there are a lot of taxpayers that may never have filed an income tax return. And if they don't have really any verifiable sources of income, if they're consistently overpaying and they don't owe a tax liability according to their account balance, the IRS probably won't care. At some point, they might recalculate an overpayment. They might send a payment to that taxpayer to make sure that they're not overpaid on their tax balance. But you don't need to file a tax return necessarily. And certainly there are a lot of income-based exemptions that people don't need to file a tax return. So if your taxable income is less than your standard deduction, you don't need to file a tax return. So in this case, we popped out the answer. The IRS will make the correction to your tax return. So you wanted to amend your 2020 tax return, but you never filed one. So this is the canned response that comes out of the ITA. Now that's probably not a realistic scenario. So instead of going to the ITA home, I'm going to back up and I'm going to say, actually, no, I never filed it. Oh, oops, sorry, I did make that. So I guess in this situation, I wanted to amend my 2020 tax return, but I'm only doing it for one of those two reasons. The IRS basically says, hey, don't worry, we've got you, we'll fix it, and we'll make it better. So now if you go all the way back to say 2019, and now you want to amend it because either you registered for an economic impact payment using the non-filers tool, or by entering 0 or 1 as your adjusted gross income and you need to actually file your tax return, then it'll take you to the next question. Are you amending your original return only for one of those reasons previously stated? We're going to answer no this time and see what happens. And did we file an original? Yes, we did. Then basically it says because you registered for an economic impact payment, you need to complete your tax return on paper and then mail it in. Write amended EIP return at the top and include a copy of the document that you used to register for the economic impact payment. So one of the things that has come out in recent years that's really been kind of overlooked because of a lot of tax changes is the fact that you can file an amended tax return online. It used to be in prior years that you could not file an amended tax return electronically. You could only file it via paper. However, in recent years, the Form 1040 or 1040-X, which is the amended tax return form, is included as an electronic tax document that you can file. You can even file it for free using the IRS website. So we'll put links to the fillable tax forms and the IRS Form 1040-X in our show notes. Let's go through, let's see if I can refresh this without resetting the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this. We're going to hit continue. Let's just say we wanted to file an amended tax return for 2022. So I'm not sure, I guess we can clear that question out. You know what, let me back all the way to this one. Now let me start. All right. So we're going to amend 2022. Have you filed an original? Yes. Did you receive a notice from the IRS related to the change that you're asking about? So if we select yes, then the IRS will basically say you might need to file an amended tax return if you see other errors or if you need to make changes other than what was covered by the notice. However, it says in bold, follow the instructions in the notice. So don't necessarily need to file an amended tax return unless the notice tells you to. So let's go back and answer this in the negative. Do you need to change your filing status? Maybe you got divorced, maybe you got married, maybe you put the wrong filing status. So if you put yes, and now you're going to answer what your original tax filing status was. Let's just say you originally filed as single and now you want to file as married jointly. Is your either the taxpayer or the spouse deceased? Then you can file your amended tax return. Now, this does state that changing your filing status, that tax return must be filed within 3 years of the original due date. And it also says that you should mail your Form 1040-X. However, it also says you might be eligible to file electronically. Now, with every scenario that comes out, you'll get a long list of instructions. You'll get a review screen that shows you, the steps that, the questions along each step and how you answer that question. So be sure that you review this part of the screen to make sure that the instructions you received are reflecting the questions that you actually answered, like the way that you intended to answer those questions. For example, if you meant, I actually got divorced and I should have changed from married filing jointly to single, would that have impacted something? You know, is someone not deceased? So let me go back and say no one's deceased. Then you would definitely need to file an amended tax return. But previously there was instruction based on filing for a decedent. You can notice that that popped off. So let's go back and get to that section. So decedent information, right? So you write the word deceased, the name and the date of death across the top of your form. If there isn't a personal representative, then the surviving spouse would sign and write filing as surviving spouse. So if there's a personal representative, there's additional instruction. So you can always check online with the Where's My Amended Return to Online tool. That will give you some information. However, there is a notice that says amended returns can take up to 16 weeks to process. And it'll take up to 3 weeks from the date that you mailed it in just to show up in the system. So unless the amended tax return online tool says you need to call the IRS, you probably will be wasting your time calling the IRS to get the status of your tax return when you can simply check the online tool. And also keep in mind the waiting periods outlined in the instructions. During COVID, I do know as a matter of personal experience that amended tax returns were taking I had a financial planning client that it took almost 9 months to receive that amended tax return back. And they were due a fairly substantial refund. So I checked every week and the status did not change. It literally didn't even change until after the check showed up. So you just don't know. So do use this tool. It's a very good tool to help you determine whether or not your personal circumstances warrant having to file an amended tax return. So like I said, this is pretty straightforward. It should take no more than 5 to 10 minutes of your time. You can use that to play around. There is one last thing here. You can hit the review button and you can get the snapshot right here. This is the screen, and then you can go back to the questionnaire here. So that's all I have for this video. We will put links to the IRS website where you can access this specific interactive tax assistant tool on your own and play around with it if you want. We'll also put links to the Form 1040X where you can file your amended tax return online. And we'll continue making these videos to help you make the best of these IRS website resources. There are a lot of resources out there and they're very good. So for a lot of taxpayers. If you have any questions, please hit me up in the comments section. If you have any topics that you would like me to dig into or look into and talk about, please let me know. I'm always trying to research for more topics to produce videos about. I am trying to find topics out there that other people aren't covering so that I can cover them for people like you. So like I said, if you have any questions or comments, please hit me up. Otherwise, have a great day and thank you very much.